Welcome to the Ways Forward podcast. I'm James Pattinson, and today I'm joined by Sarah Batters. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you.
Um, Sarah, can you tell us a bit about who you are, where you're from, what brings you here today?
So, hi. Right now, I'm working in football. I've been working in football for the last 7 years across Premier League and most recently in the WSL as the managing director of London City Lionesses.
Yeah.
But that was a different step for me. Before that, I started my career in consumer goods
Did you?
at Procter Gamble many years ago in fragrances and then cosmetics with a little bit of consulting in between.
Brilliant. Okay, so the journey from consumer goods to sports, and what moments or events have contributed to who you are today, would you say?
So yeah, I've been reflecting a lot recently on my career path. I'm in a moment of working out what's next. And I think the thing that connects everything that I've done has been about how do you turn people into fans of your product? So
Yeah.
more than just customers and consumers, but fans. So working at Procter& Gamble, I was lucky enough to work in the fine fragrances division. So on brands, Lacoste, Escada, Gucci. And that was all about how do you get people to buy a fragrance, but all fragrances, they're all really the same. Okay, there's a preference between they smell, but it's about that connection with the brand and the
Mm.
identity and what it says about the person. And I think I've taken that through my career since then. Um, Working in cosmetics as well, it's the same. It's all about identity, who you want to be, who do you want to be perceived as. And then moving into football, it's the same. Football is all about identity. You choose your club to support, and it says a lot about who you are, and it can influence all who your friends are, what your routine is. Many people have it as a central part of their life. And it's been interesting moving from men's football, where it's about a lot of people inherit who they support and their club. So from a marketing point of view, it's about how do you deepen their loyalty, get them to come more, get them to buy a shirt, deepen. And then I'm moving into the women's game, where it's a completely different topic. And it was about building fan bases and starting from
Mm.
scratch. And, that's quite a fascinating situation to be in, of how do you attract people to support a football club? How do you get them to try it out? And then how do you get them to become a fan and become loyal to that club?
Yes. And how did you do that?
And how
Because I
did I
know there are
do
some
that?
fascinating
And
elements there.
I think it's going back to marketing basics, really. So when I first moved into football, which was Southampton Football Club,
Yeah.
as marketing and partnerships director
In the men's
in the men's
Premier
game,
League.
yeah, in the Premier League at the time, I was hired by someone who was also from agency and consumer goods background, and we were a bit different, actually. We were one of the only people that were in football that were coming from a non-sports background. And it just meant that we viewed it in a completely different way. So really thinking of the fans as consumers,
Mm.
and as customers. And just those basic kind of marketing principles, funnel marketing, it's about awareness, consideration,
Mm.
conversion, and advocacy. And so when I moved to London City Lionesses, the club was it had been established for a few years, but it was in the championship. It didn't really have an infrastructure. It didn't have an organizational maturity or setup. And fans, there was only about 400 fans
Okay.
that went to the match. Um, when I left, there was more like 4,000, close to 4,000 fans. And we did that through looking at it through a marketing lens. So how do you drive awareness? Well, actually, stepping back, who are your target
Yeah.
fans? Who are the people that are likely to want to engage with women's football? And, that audience actually, and that prospective audience is really quite different to the men's game. There is a lot of
Mm.
crossover between the men's and women's game. So if you're a fan of Arsenal men's, you'll be also a fan of Arsenal women's. But there's a lot of people coming new to football with women's football because it just offers a different experience, a safer environment, a more inclusive environment. So identifying who are those people that we're likely to bring in. And London City Lionesses, I've not mentioned, but it's an independent women's football club, so it doesn't have the men's team to lean on. So really had to think every single fan was new. We always just say no one was born a London City Lionesses fan.
Yeah.
Um, so looking at the audiences and people, the drivers of why they'd engage, a lot was about community, social, family time. And so building then experiences that would suit what they were looking for. So
Mm.
understanding their needs. So just like consumer and product marketing, understanding what their needs were, and then building an experience at the football match to match those needs and inviting them to trial. So in the first year at London City in the Championship, we gave away about 90% of tickets for free. That was, and price I don't think was a barrier. Prices in the WSL are quite low compared to Premier League football. But it's just about getting people into trial.
Yeah.
It's getting them in, having a great match day. We'd measure match day experience from, I think we started off about 6.7, ended up towards a 9, but measuring all those different elements and then finding, like we do in consumer brand marketing, what are those barriers?
Yeah.
So what are the reasons that would prevent someone from coming back? Those could be things like the facilities,
Mm-hmm.
very important in football, travel, access, availability of information, and use all that information to then reiterate and build the experience. And the goal there is that people leave and go, well, I just had such an amazing time. I went to this women's football match. It wasn't what I was expecting. The kids did loads of activities. They met the players. The food and beverage was good. There was enough toilets for women,
Yeah.
which
Important.
it's such an important thing. Toilets are very important. And then they want to come back. But then more importantly, it's the advocacy. So then they tell their friends and growing it from there. So that is, quite a kind of typical approach from a marketing point of view, but it's been a real fascinating experience to apply that to building a football fan base at London City.
That's fascinating. And I'm really interested in this family experience because I'd imagine, were you painting on a blank canvas with the idea of come to football, and did people have perceptions of, oh, football's like this, or is the idea of a women's fit football a different thing? And secondly, when you talk about families, is that this is mum's event bringing the kids, or is it mum and dad, or is it dad bringing everyone? How did that work?
Yeah, so if you're a parent of small kids,
Mm.
as I have been, and you're looking for being able to take the kids out and give them new experiences, but in a safe way where you're not left stranded without being able to use changing facilities, for
Yeah.
example, or where do I put a pram? How do I keep them entertained? It's well documented that attention span is decreasing. And I mean, my kids still don't seem to have the capacity to watch a 90-minute match of football. One's getting there. But how can they keep their kids entertained during the match? We set up family fan zones where the kids could do activities before the match, crafting activities, meet the players, games, and really have that excitement. And then at halftime, making sure there was enough entertainment, but also accessibility to food and drink to keep
Right.
them engaged. And then who did we see would bring their families? So interestingly, when you look at the stats of women's football, it's still about 50-50 men and women that come. And I think that men is driven by fathers bringing their kids.
Yeah.
It's not groups of single men going on their own as you would see in a men's match, but it's men bringing their daughters,
Having
their
some time.
sons. Yeah. And
Permission to leave the
yeah,
house and
exactly. And being able to engage in an activity that they enjoy together. And it feels like a safe space to bring them to. And that's really important because, I think this is something that men's football needs to think about more carefully, is how you create sustainable fan bases.
Mm.
So, and this is one of the challenges I worked on at Southampton. So kids today actually have far more football teams in their consideration set than they ever have done. So I'm a typical story of I support the team that my dad supported. I rebelled once for about a year and then went back, but that was my entry into football. But kids today, around 8 years old, they could have up to 10 clubs in their consideration set. So that can be their local team. It can be the team that their favorite player plays for, and they switch, which
Yeah.
is just a completely strange concept for people of our generation of switching. But yeah, where their favorite player, it could be the team they play on FIFA, it could be the team that's winning. And you see kids with multiple shirts.
Mm.
Um, and it's around kind of 12 years old that they kind of select those down to maybe 3 or 4. And it's so important for football clubs to make sure that they are in that consideration set at that age, and put the effort into kind of capturing the attention. Because otherwise, the fan base will not be sustainable as
Mm.
kind of older fans, pass away.
That's the magic moment at around 12. So,
Yeah.
and you see this a lot in grocery as well, that people have maybe a main shop and then they go to various different. I mean, it's quite staggering actually when you look at, people live, I go here and there, but it's interesting in the football sense that actually at then around 12, people choose this is it. And then that's it, is it?
Yeah, they
Yeah.
lock in, but they don't necessarily lock into one.
Okay.
And it'll be interesting as we kind of, look at fan bases as they develop, how that strengthens after that age. So
Mm,
by the time do they get to 2025, do they then lock in at one? We don't really know that yet because we're really dealing with a different kind of dynamic of a young football fan, driven by choosing players over clubs.
interesting.
Um, you know, a good example I always use was Jesse Lingard, of when he went from Man United to West Ham. How many kids went with him? And yeah, lots of other players. They attract the fans and they follow them rather than the team.
That's fascinating. And what's the interplay between the men's and the women's game? Because I'd imagine then, you know, if you look at it just from this is the men's game, and you choose, but then if maybe you're going to the London City Lionesses or Southampton Women's or something like that, people start broadening. I mean, what's the role of the different parents or stakeholders in that decision making?
Yeah, it is a really interesting point that some people support one men's club and a different women's club.
Yeah.
So maybe the men's club is the the club their family have supported,
Mm,
but then they've been more engaged with the women's team because it's not necessarily the same. Manchester United is a really good example. Manchester United is one of the kind of most followed men's teams in the world, one of the biggest brands in the world. And their women's club wasn't supported for a long time and is now, but has maybe not kind of got that same devoted following. And so I know people that are a Man United men's fan, but actually support Arsenal women.
right.
So it's a real interesting kind of situation. And then also London City Lionesses as an independent club give people that option to support a different club. And actually that was why a lot of people did support and do support London City Lionesses, was it felt like a bit of freedom to not have to support the club that your men's club that you support, but you're not having Arsenal fans supporting Spurs, for example.
Yeah. Yeah.
It gave you a bit of kind of freedom and clean space.
That's fascinating, and I think let's imagine if it's giving a lot of hope to different football teams or challenger football teams who aren't so established, that they can start build their own fan bases with some kind of smart thinking to meet people where they're at.
Absolutely. And kind of designing that experience to meet that potential fan
Mm,
base. Um, women's football is growing. And the Lionesses' success in the Euros twice has really engaged. Grassroots girls football is accelerating at a huge pace. And so all of those girls and their families are the fans of what the fans of now and the fans of the future. And
yeah,
so it's a really interesting moment in how people are kind of choosing their
there's
teams.
just making me think of the classic shopper consumer distinction of,
Yeah.
if mum is more engaged in football, the daughters, then what's that influence in the shopping decision of where we should go as a family to watch football? It's quite a interesting new dynamic, I
Yeah,
imagine.
and I've seen so many stories, particularly where we are, and Arsenal women are leading the game in terms of supporters.
Mm.
They invested early, they've done a fantastic job. But I've seen a number of stories of Arsenal families, but then becoming London City Lionesses supporters, because the experience is completely different. At Arsenal, it's at the Emirates, it's big, it's kind of, there's a distance between fans and players, whereas London City, it was much more kind of intimate, close, and the kids loved that experience.
I'm fascinated by this because in a way, it's very rare. I mean, how many people have started up a football team like that? Not, I don't know, not many, I'd imagine, but you've been able to create an experience exactly as you want it. Is it fair to say that in some ways, because you see this in banking with legacy systems, the big banks have transformed into online apps, but they're never as good as some of the challenger banks, in my view, because they haven't got any legacy systems to build on. So when you're talking about the stadium, at Arsenal, there's the men's stadium. It's set up with a certain amount of space. It was perhaps designed more for a male audience. You
Yeah.
mentioned toilets earlier, things like that, nappy changing. Um, what was it like starting up a football team and building that from the base up?
Yeah, it's incredibly liberating to not have the attachment to a men's club. It meant that every kind of decision could be made from the perspective of women first, and
Yeah.
the women's fans first. And that gave a lot of scope for designing the fan experience in terms of trial and error, right?
Mm.
Just testing things out and seeing if they worked or not, and not being beholden to this is the way we've always done it, or you can't do this. Now, still there's challenges because London City play in a men's stadium. Um, but it's quite exciting to watch what Brighton are doing. So they're going to be building the first women's stadium in the UK or Europe, even designed for women. And, there are so many different kind of architectural points in the design of a stadium that do differ from men's to women's.
Mm.
I had the pleasure of chatting to the architect that did Kansas' new stadium in the US, which is built for women. And it's just, yes, toilets again are one, but also changing facilities, food and drink options. Like, it's completely different. A number of times at Bromley, we'd run out of chips, but have kegs of beer,
Right.
because the men's experience is, oh yeah, just buy loads of kegs of beer. Don't worry about the food. And the women's is completely different because you're feeding kids. You're like,
Yes.
I don't want to have a beer. And
Yes.
at the beginning, we had a few situations of, running out of chips, but having loads of beer untouched and kind of working through that. But building a stadium designed for women gives you the opportunity to actually build, the facilities to suit that fan base. And also then the players as well. So the changing rooms, the environments for them to be able to prepare themselves for the game the best way possible, rather than, getting changed in a men's dressing room that has a load of urinals on the wall. We talked about toilets quite a lot, but you wouldn't believe in football how much you do.
I was kind of debating whether to put it up, but I think toilets are such an underrated bit of experience. I mean, restaurants generally know that quite well because you're eating, and so the toilet or the loo is where you can judge cleanliness or the experience. It's kind of an area, but definitely male design spaces don't appreciate the different dynamics of women
Yeah.
and families. So I'm with you on that.
Very important. Every time you do a fan survey at the end of a football match, the biggest contention points are toilets and food and beverage,
Yeah,
and then stewarding,
yeah,
which makes sense, right? Because those are your direct
yeah,
shopper customer touch points, right? From the experience.
yes,
Now, it's always interesting as well. There's a difference if the team wins and loses, it has an effect on the overall scores, and you have to work quite hard to find some kind of coefficient to kind of remove the impact of the score from the feedback that you get. So if the team lose, all the scores are always
Much lower.
much lower. And if they win, it's much better. So, getting informed feedback can be hard to find sometimes. But yeah, it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, isn't it, right?
Yeah.
That you need to make sure that people feel like their basic needs are taken care of, so then they can enjoy the day. And that's safety, hunger, feeling.
Yes. That's it.
Yeah,
Self-actualization if you win.
exactly.
And I'm fascinated because starting up a football team like that, I mean, I suppose you've designed it with a kind of design thinking approach of who's your audience, what's important, and then work that through. But that's a huge undertaking to set up a football club, and all the back office, the systems. Can you tell us a bit about some of the challenges you faced, or the things you're most proud of?
Yeah, so for me, this was also my kind of first step into general management. So my
Yeah.
background has always been marketing and commercial. And that's, my strong suit, my bread and butter. So stepping into an environment where I was also responsible for establishing areas of business that wasn't my expertise was a really, like personally, a really good growth step for me. And, you get some things right and you get some things wrong. And it's a learning curve. Being able to manage teams that are not your expertise. So where you need to kind of lean on the knowledge and expertise of others, but still use your leadership abilities to drive things forward.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was took the team from kind of 20 people to about 80. So very quick kind of hiring process, embedding people. I was very lucky to have an incredible head of people and culture, which I think is the magic of leading a team, is finding people and surrounding yourself with people that are exceptional in their knowledge and their abilities, and you're just there to kind of guide the ship and set the direction and get people to where they're going. So yeah, hugely challenging, very, very fast paced. I was fortunate to have had experience working in startups. After I left Procter Gamble, I went immediately to a startup for a couple of years and then consulted startups for 7 years. So used to that kind of environment. And yeah, I think, a few kind of personal mantras that helped was make things exist first and make them good later.
Yeah.
Some might call that winging it, I don't know, but no, make things exist first, establish a basic, and then you can iterate and improve. Also, I'm a very kind of what's the worst that can happen mindset.
Yeah.
Um, I kind of have a high tolerance of risk and pace. Important to surround myself with people who do ask the questions of, well, no, that thing could actually go wrong, Sarah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's our mitigation plan? And having some people that are, I'm always there ready to take the brakes off and go. And some people say, no, let's just keep the brakes on for a little bit. But having that kind of optimistic drive
Yeah.
to get something kind of up and running and moving forward, I think was vital. And yeah, being able to kind of build a team that delivered. I'm a starter. I'm an ideas person. I'm a get
Yeah.
things going. Get bored in very tiny details. So surrounding yourself by people that complement.
That's good. That's good. And is what gets you up in the morning? You mentioned optimistic drive. I mean, where does that come from?
Think I've always been that way inclined. I've done the personality test, and that's what always shows. I think the last model of those I did, I was branded or bucketed as forcefully optimistic.
Forcefully. That's good.
um,
That's a
Forcefully
good one.
optimistic. Yeah, get up, get things done. And where's that drive? I guess I've
Make it
always had that
exist
drive.
first.
Makes it exist first, make it good later. Um, I have, during my career, kind of always been impatient to drive change, to create things, to do things that are new, to make things happen.
Mm.
And that's kind of driven me. And I've also been, I think, quite brave in decision making.
Yeah.
Um, I have made jumps in my career where I think other people would maybe have agonized over that decision a little bit longer than I did. Um, but, the P&G thing, we get trained at P&G to trust our gut. So developing that gut feel of knowing maybe having a good sense of what's the right direction to go in,
Yeah.
and then kind of pushing that forward. And kind of what motivates me, like I I rate productivity very highly. I love to be productive. Um, but in the last few years, one of the things that's kind of really motivated me is I've developed my career into a position where I actually can impact and make change.
Yeah.
So there was a sliding doors moment in my career, right at the beginning. So I had an internship at Procter Gamble, had a great time in Switzerland, and then finished my university, and actually was on track to join in the civil service in the fast track.
Oh, were you?
Yes. So my degree was international politics and Spanish.
Yeah.
That was the direction I was headed, to international politics. And there was 25 spaces on the civil service fast track, and I got a phone call. That was number 26. And I was told, if someone drops out, you're in. And obviously no one drops out. But I had the job offer at Procter and Gamble. So I took that turn. So that kind of sliding doors moment
Yes.
kind of pushed me into that kind of commercial career path. But, social impact, change, international development has always been very important to me.
Mhm.
And in the last few years, my career has moved in a place where I feel like I'm delivering on that through sport.
Yeah.
So through the women's game, making opportunities for women and girls to participate in sport, increasing the visibility of athletes and role models, and making an impact there. And then also I hold a trustee position at Kick It Out, trying to eradicate discrimination from the game, but also having a real influence on policy
Yeah.
and the government, and how we're tackling kind of discrimination in our society through sport, how sport can help. And so that drives me, because I do actually feel like my work, even though it's football and it's fun and it's a game, it is actually having an impact on wider society.
Absolutely. I mean, all the family time that people are having, the memories that are created, the bonds, especially nowadays where time and attention, as you mentioned, can be so fragmented. The role of sports to bring people together, to create connection, belonging, it's fantastic.
Yeah. And as we kind of live in a ever increasing divisive society at the moment, I think the role of sport becomes even more important
Yeah.
on how you can create those spaces to bring people together. Sport is a connecting force.
Yeah.
And so how you can use it for good. So that drives me.
That's great. And in terms of people who've inspired you or heroes, who do you look up to or have done in the past?
I'd say I'm having a moment of, I guess, people have inspired me have moved, changed throughout my career at different points. I think right now I'm having a moment thinking a lot about Serena Williams.
Okay.
So watched her come back to Wimbledon last week, and watched her with my girls. I have an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old girl who have no idea about her career.
Mm.
Trying to explain her career to them, and also the the qualities that she has brought to get to where she is. I mean, the GOAT of tennis, right?
Yeah.
And explaining that to my kids has really made me reflect as well on that. And I'm going to get them to watch King Richard, the film. But I just find it just inspiring, that career has lasted for so long. And then to kind of have children, come back again, but then retire and then come back again. Like, it's just incredible.
Yeah. fortitude and
The
determination and
determination, pushing your limits, pushing boundaries, like you're
yeah,
never done. That's what I got. That's the message I got from this week was like, everyone would think she's done. She's not done.
yeah.
And then how she also uses her platform after sport to impact sport going forward. And she's active not just in tennis but in football and a broader remit. And her husband is an investor in or Angel City, and then also in Chelsea Women's. And
Mm.
they're using their platform to further the progress of women in girls sports. So currently very, very inspired by Serena.
That's brilliant. I'm fascinated as well about you mentioned your father used to take you to football. Do you think that's where the seeds were sown? Because I'm always fascinated in how, when you look back at life, these little breadcrumbs of, you said sliding doors, but things can make sense over time. And
100%.
yeah.
So I used to go with my dad to watch Manchester City in the 90s as a kid, like in the away stands, like probably where you absolutely, I would not take my own daughter. I mean, I would take my daughter to Man City now, but not the environment I was in. Not much health and safety back in those days. So I used to go with my dad. Like, I've always been a massive football fan. And I think even if I look back, even at that age, I'd spend a lot of time watching other fans. For me, like anyone that knows me, I barely know sometimes who some players are. Like, I'm not a tactical um I was going to say genius, but I'm way, way off that. Shouldn't even say that word. For me, it's about the experience and belonging and being part of
Mm.
something. And I've always loved football's ability to take you on a complete emotional journey within 90 minutes. And I don't think, for me personally, there's something that just like impacts my emotions as much as football.
Yeah, it's visceral, isn't it?
Yeah, how you can go from just being like defeated to the absolute ecstasy. I mean, the England game this week, I think when England scored their second goal, I said to my
Did you
husband,
stay up for it?
I I watched it at 5 a.m. without
Okay,
spoilers.
sensible.
Yeah. But after England scored the second goal, I said, that's it, we've won it. We're winning the World Cup. I'd gone on that journey, and then literally in the
Yes.
second half, then the nerves kept back in, and I love it. And I've always just loved watching football fans. I've been fascinated with fandom and why people choose football. And the reason my path into football came that I relocated back to England after being overseas for 10 years in Switzerland and Australia. And a good friend of mine was working in football, and I went to a match with him in the capacity of his role. And I was like, hang on a minute, I could do my job, but in football. And, when I went to university, there weren't commercial careers in football. There wasn't a business of football back then. So it wasn't a career path. Whereas
Mm.
now there's whole universities set up to help develop people into football business talent. So um, I actually went to do a hackathon at Manchester City and slept in the Etihad for 36 hours. I think I'm one of the only people that can say I've slept in the Etihad on a bunk bed.
Oh, wow.
It was brilliant. I was one of the only actual fans
Could
there.
be an extra, tourist experience, fan
I
experience
think
there.
so. And it's funny now because where we held it was like in the director's box. And when I go now as a director sometimes, where again, back to the bathroom, I'm like, this is the one I brushed my teeth in. And we got showered in the away dressing room. It was a brilliant experience. But anyway, it was about how to use football to connect to international fans. And I ended up winning that. And it was like my first real insight into actually this is what I want to do. And so I planned a way into football and luckily got the job at Southampton Football Club. And when I was at Southampton and, that kind of love of just the fans and the experience became even stronger. And so most matches I'd sit in the stands and I wouldn't be watching the match. I'd just be watching what fan people do. And I've always been so interested in the fact that within the bowl of a football match, you can have someone who's literally spent their last pound on getting a ticket for that match or their season tickets or use just that is where they put all their benefit checks, right, into their season ticket, next to someone who's spent like £20,000
Yeah.
for the same entertainment on the pitch. Obviously, the experience is a bit different, but you're all in one place. And what's
Mm.
connecting is a love of the game.
Yeah, love. That's a really good word, isn't it? I mean, how do you think about the word love in terms of brand building and experience?
It's that, that's what makes a fan, or that's what makes a consumer keep coming back, is that it's such an emotional connection, and how you build that love. Football, again, really interesting from a marketing point of view, because where else, what other industry in the world can you go and watch a match, watch a terrible game of football? Your team's lost 3-0. It's atrocious. You want the manager out. You've had a rubbish time at half time because you haven't been able to get in the queue to get a drink. You then get a pint of beer and you have to drink it in about 5 minutes, miss the first half, second, probably miss your team score. It's a terrible experience for a
Yeah.
lot of people, week in and week out, but they keep going back. Why? Because of that emotional connection that they've created with that club.
Mm.
If you compare it to the theatre, people don't go and watch a terrible play where they can't, they've had a terrible kind of half interval experience, and they don't go back. They don't tell their friends to go and watch that play, do they?
Yes.
They go
Yes.
back to football.
Kevin Roberts, who is actually a Man City fan as well, he calls it loyalty beyond reason,
It is.
which is, yeah,
It is loyalty beyond reason, but I want to give reason to it, right? And that's what you can do, because there's a big difference between a season ticket holder who's paid for their season ticket and walks in, walks out, but then because they're not having a good experience, they don't spend money behind the bar, they don't buy a shirt, they don't go to the shop on the way out. There's a big difference between that and someone who is buying a shirt for their kids,
mm,
and um, upgrading their seats, and building that love in fans is possible, and it can be, I believe, detached to the score on the pitch. And I think it is more about the experience that people have.
yeah, absolutely. And to create that experience, there's a lot of work obviously going behind the scenes. What's been your leadership experience in football? And I suppose connected to that, have there only been any words of wisdom over the years that have stood you in good stead?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, stepping into football, I was quite eyes wide open. I was stepping into a very male dominated environment,
Mm.
um, which I hadn't been in before. And actually, before I took my first role, I called, you'll know Jill Whitty Collins.
Yeah.
She wrote a book called Why Men Win at Work. And I called Jill and I said, look, words of advice. How do I win? And not the men. No, but words of advice. I'm going into a very, very male dominated environment. How do I succeed? And the advice that she gave me was that, look, Sarah, you can't do anything other than be your authentic self. And then believe that your authentic self can succeed. And, if you try to be someone that you're not, it never lasts.
Yeah.
And so, that gave me a perspective going into that role. It was like, okay, well, no, I don't need to pretend to be someone else to succeed in this male dominated environment. I just have to be myself, but also bring those strengths that I have, that maybe others don't. Um, and so I did that. I have a huge belief in authentic leadership, and it's probably because I can't be any other way. And that is what people want from their leaders. I think there's been a transition in leadership from people that may be a bit more cutthroat and tough and
Sharp elbows
yeah, and
and
demand
pushing.
the result. Where are the results? Like, I'm a people first leader. And to build those relationships with people, authenticity is key. It
Yeah.
accelerates trust and loyalty. And if you have that, then I believe you're going to be far more successful.
It's hard to change the game in fan experience and if you're not people first, because the culture you want inside is the culture that gets reflected in all the decisions, everything from, you mentioned the stewards through to the people serving the chips or the beers.
100%.
Yeah.
It's all got to be people first. And then, reflecting, is that going back to then my P&G starts, where we have ingrained in us the consumer is boss,
Yeah.
right? So Words of advice. There we go.
There we go. No,
The consumer is boss, right?
that's
It's
really
still
good
true.
one. And also the importance, you mentioned Jill Whitty Collins, a great book, and having the right mentors and support across the way. And sounds like in the way that you've had mentorship in that examples, you also pass it on with the work you're doing and sitting on the kick it out. What's been the most rewarding moments of your career, or what are you most proud of?
I think to work in football, you've got to love the roller coaster. You've got to love the highs, love the lows, chase the emotion, right?
Love the risk.
You love the risk, love where it pays off. And I think, 3 great years working for Southampton, but we were in the relegation zone or near enough every season, and then eventually got relegated just before I left. And so, that first season with London City Lionesses, it was chaotic in terms of having to build a training ground. When I arrived, the grass was yellow, and there was what the football department would describe as a mountain in the middle of the pitch. And we had to create an environment for the female athletes to succeed. Never been in more of a true example of painting the plane while we're flying it.
Yeah.
So bringing all these amazing female athletes, giving them what they need, trying to, in the background, making the best environment for the sporting department to succeed, the athletes to succeed, building a fan base. And then we got promoted at the end of it. Like, we achieved it. And it came down to like the last couple of minutes. There's a video actually of me on Sky TV watching it, and you can see, again, authentic, but you can see like can't hide the anguish on my face and just that moment of winning it. And I definitely did think, I had always been on the other side of the football matches.
Yes.
And so it was an amazing moment, and the team had achieved like so much and just being part of that. So that was incredibly rewarding. There are other examples of really rewarding moments, particularly with sponsors, where one of them is bringing Starling Bank on as the front of shirt of Southampton Women's Club. It's the first time Starling Bank had done sports sponsorship, so it was a new thing for them, and we were able to kind of create a sponsorship platform which not only gave them what they needed in terms of ROI and, traditional kind of marketing metrics, but also made an impact on the game, like a really purpose-driven partnership. And they invested in how to create more female coaches in the game, in the grassroots game,
wow.
through training. So it was very rewarding to actually put out a partnership that ticked the commercial goals of Southampton at the time, but also of Starling Bank, but also had that impact on society.
Yes.
And on what we were trying to do. So a bit of a triple win.
I always think that that kind of triple win thinking of purpose, in other words, is the highest art of the marketing, where you can do the commercial, the return on investment, you can do more than the sponsors imagine possible, but then you're also making change as you go along.
Yeah. And so I think hitting those triple wins, that's a high.
Triple win. There's something in that, I think. And if you were kind of, you've obviously had a very varied and interesting and impactful career. If you were to go back and meet your 18-year-old self, what advice would you give yourself?
One would be, don't spend all the money. Definitely had a great time in our 20s around the world. Wouldn't change it for the world, but a lot of us leave school maybe not financially educated enough. So that would be one of them. And then I think just reiterating that confidence in being brave about decisions, like trusting your gut when, there's times I've moved on from roles and I've not really known what I was going to do next, but it was just trusting my gut that it, not that it would work out, but it would become clear what was to happen next, which, sounds vague, but I say this to if you put in the effort to create the connections, to know your staff, to build relationships, it's amazing what paths open. And so actually then when you leave something and you really invest in those times, it's amazing what opens up. And I think a reassurance to my 18-year-old self of trust your gut, say yes, just
Yeah.
say yes to things, and be open to things not being what your plan was. But saying that, I don't think I ever really had a plan. I don't think I ever really started my career thinking of where I wanted to get to. I've just stayed open-minded to what would be interesting next.
I love that, saying yes. And also what you mentioned earlier is make things exist first. And I think as a young person, being able to say, actually, I'm going to just say yes and do it. I don't know what's going to happen. And, these things create unforeseen movements, and that can create momentum.
100%. I referenced earlier that before I moved into football, me and a friend had a football podcast, which I won't name. Don't go looking for it. um, and that was just something fun for me and her to do. So I was living here in the UK. She was in Switzerland. Actually, it was a friendship connection more
Yeah.
than anything. And we talked about fantasy football, and it was a great experience. Now, we just recorded that like on our computers, did not know what we were doing. I learned to edit through that. We managed to get it out. We were featured in Grazia magazine. It opened up so many conversations with people because we were talking about football. There was a funny series on this podcast about how bad we were at pronouncing footballers' names.
Right.
So then actually we started interviewing footballers when we'd see them about how to pronounce their names, which was a silly thing, but it was a conversation starter.
It's so
So,
interesting that again, that passion for football, whilst you probably didn't at that time think, oh, I'd love to be
not
a
at all.
managing director of a football team or a marketing director, the seeds again were there, the passion. I think it's so important for people to actually appreciate what they're interested in and passionate about and follow that, even if there might not be a clearly defined
Plan.
result. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think eventually that gave me some credibility to move into football, because although I was someone moving from the brand world, commercial world, there was a credibility there that I actually, didn't know what I was talking about, but I had a real strong interest in
Well,
football.
that's it often, isn't it?
And that was a self-started project for fun. So there was no barriers to start that
Yeah.
other than just doing it.
Yeah. Make it exist
Make
first.
it exist
I
first,
love
make it
that.
good
I love that.
later.
And connected to that, if you were to meet your 30-year-old self again, what advice would you give?
Think just trying to reflect around that time. That was about the time I left Procter and Gamble.
Mm.
Was just before I was 30. Um, so I was at that was a very difficult decision to make. It was amazing experience working at Procter and Gamble, and the amount that you learn, the business school. As such a young person, I was responsible for like 10 countries in Asia. I was opening stores in Vietnam. Like I was in my 20s still.
Yeah.
I remember once actually getting sent off to because I started in finance for 3 years. And I got sent off to do an audit in South Korea of a joint venture that P&G had realised they'd picked up along
This
the
is
way in an
brilliant.
acquisition. And my boss then, Luigi Faiola, said, well, Sarah, you're going to have to go to South Korea and go and see what this company is doing. So off I went as a 24-year-old
Brilliant.
to audit this company in South Korea, which the owner of the company, which a man must have been in his 60s in Korea, was a bit like, who's this young girl? Anyway, it was a very difficult decision to leave, but I had a little bit in my head. People would say, you were either 7 years or a lifer.
Right.
And I was like, I'm not a lifer. So 7 years is approaching, time to make a jump and make that move. But I didn't know what to or where. And I did. I made the jump into a startup, and I was there a couple of years. Good learning experience. I think a lot of people, when they leave P&G, they're not their most successful in their first thing afterwards,
Mm.
because it's a huge adjustment
Yeah.
from being as part of a big corporation. And so there were times when I'd made that jump into that startup, that I definitely was like, oh God, what have I done? Like I had it all, but I had big teams and big budgets, and suddenly it was very different. And you have that moment going, have I done the right thing? So I think the advice would be, to like keep on that, keep testing yourself and keep throwing yourself into uncomfortable situations, because actually
Yes.
that's where probably the bigger growth goes. And, that wasn't, my most successful chapter of my career, but the amount I learned in that role has definitely been so important
Yeah.
going forward.
That's a great insight. And I think, you know, it's bringing up for me that one of the interesting things of the many that you said is around the gut. But to build a gut instinct, you have to expose
Yeah.
yourself to different experiences and things not going well and the risk of failure or uh, just disappointment. Is there anything you'd add on that?
No, I love that. I think, you're not going to build your gut feel without experiencing a lot of things and talking
Yeah,
to a lot of people, and,
yeah,
you know, also knowing you can get that wrong as well. But
and that's
from getting it
okay.
wrong, yeah, it's
Get it
okay.
wrong because if you're not making wrong mistakes, then you're not pushing. You haven't got enough of a risk
You haven't
so
got enough of
far.
a risk, and also how are you gonna know next time?
Exactly. Yeah.
Knowing about whether an environment is the right environment to be in, and um, so yeah, I've been in a lot of different environments, worked with a lot of different people, but every single one of them, even though at the time it might have been a really difficult situation, or maybe being in a toxic culture, or all of this, now how much that has given me
Mm.
to be able to lead teams and build organizations and culture, because I've seen good and I've seen really bad,
Yeah.
and
Brilliant.
that's okay.
Sarah, thanks so much. This has been brilliant to hear your thoughts on this. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we bring this to a close?
Don't think so. It's been great, James. Lovely to chat.
Thanks,
Um,
Sarah. Okay. Thank you very much.